Welcome back to One Body. I'm Cruzy.
I'm Eden.
Today we're joined by Jessika Anderson, who is a friend of a friend, and we're so lucky to have you here. Jessica is a dietitian. I would love if you could open us up and just talk about your background as a dietitian, what training you got, and then I would especially love if you walk us through your first job because we touched on that
Mhm.
earlier when we were talking, and I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. What a journey I've had, honestly. And I have had a career change since, so we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of start at the beginning because I think it kind of helps people understand who I am and a little bit about myself. So, first 25 years of my life, my dad was in the Air Force. So we moved every 2 years. So I've lived in a ton of different places, experienced tons of different cultures, different foods, all kinds of fun stuff. We moved from Hawaii to Alabama, which was a little bit of a culture shock, if you can
Wow.
imagine. But that
Mhm.
is where my dad chose to retire, of all places. So that is actually where I finished high school. So I was in Prattville, Alabama.
Okay.
At the time was where I graduated high school. And then I was kind of given the choice by my parents. All right, so in-state tuition, you've got Alabama or Auburn. And I was like, I don't know. We'd moved around so much. I didn't really have any, I guess, connections to any certain schools or anything like that. So ended up going to Auburn, absolutely loved it. And, I've always kind of been a science geeky nerd. So I love the science side of things. And I think when I started at Auburn, I was pre med. I was actually pre med nutrition.
Mm.
And it was kind of this extra route that you could do. And I really thought that that's what I wanted to do and what I wanted to specialize in. And I absolutely loved it. I thrived in the science and understanding, how food and nutrition kind of play into our bodies and make us who we are and sometimes change mental health and physical things and all kinds of fun stuff. So I really, really loved Auburn. Got a degree in nutrition from there. Ended up not doing the pre med route, which honestly, I have no regrets. My,
Yeah.
my sister and brother in law are both pediatricians, and I
Mhm.
watched them kind of go through the hell of medical school.
Yeah.
I mean, they love it now. They're doing great out here in Colorado. But so yeah, just did nutrition, graduated there with a nutrition science degree, and then actually went to University of Alabama in Birmingham for a master's in nutrition science. And I kind of specialized in a couple different things. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved the science of nutrition. I like food in general. All food is great. I'm not super picky. I try to be a healthy eater, but I just
Mhm.
enjoy food. And so, while I was in school, I focused on some eating disorder stuff, some weight loss stuff, some sports nutrition. So after doing a master's degree and a fellowship at UAB, was when I moved on to my first job. So is that good enough information about my schooling? Should I move on to the first
That's
gig?
great. What was
Okay.
your fellowship? Was it inpatient, outpatient? What did that look like?
Yeah, great. So it was all outpatient
Okay.
and it was the Children's of Birmingham, and
Uh-huh.
it was a clinic in weight loss, and we also did eating disorders and then genetic conditions. So sometimes
Nice.
people would come in with very special genetic type diets that they would need
Yeah.
our assistance with. So it
I
was really cool.
one follow-up question before you talk more of the science stuff. Where, since you've lived all over, if you could pick one spot in the world, didn't matter about where your family was or like
Mhm.
your job or finances, where would it be that you've been?
Oh my goodness. There have been some really cool places, and that is so hard because I think it depends on what mood I'm in, right? It's like, am
Yeah.
I feeling adventurous? Am I feeling like I want to relax? I'll just say my current favorite place because I just got back from there. Did not live there, but visited, is Moab, Utah. I'm really big into outdoor
Mm.
stuff and hiking and biking, and the desert is like calling me. I don't know. I love the
Mm.
desert, which is probably why we're in Colorado now.
Yeah.
So right now I'm feeling the desert vibes. Ask me in 2 weeks when I'm tired of the cold here in Colorado, and I'll be like, oh, I want Hawaii now. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I'd say Moab, Utah is really beautiful. And we got to visit there. I think we were there about 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So
Nice.
Cool.
Also, I went to Auburn for my master's in
okay.
speech pathology. I was in the Haley Center for
Nice.
too many hours.
Yeah.
But we lived in Opelika, Alabama, and I too
Okay.
was like never thought I would live in Opelika, Alabama, but here we are.
I know. I get it. Alabama's like this diamond that nobody knows about. You know what I mean? Like it's so
Yeah.
beautiful, it's affordable. Yeah, we love the food is amazing. Yeah, we come back to Alabama quite a bit.
Mhm. Fun.
Okay, so tell us about your first job.
Yeah. So my first job was wild. So at the time in Birmingham, there's just a surplus of dietitians. I think I had applied to, I kid you not, 100 jobs on LinkedIn. And I was like, I'll take anything. I just like
Mhm.
nutrition. I like that space. And I started in Birmingham, wasn't finding anything. And then I kind of spread out to the Atlanta area. I was like, that's not too far. Never been. Sounds great. Weirdly enough, I finally got an interview, I think 2 months later, and it was to be the dietitian for all the adult prisons in Georgia.
Oh.
So yeah, specifically the state prisons, because I had to learn all that. There is a difference between, the county jails and the federal prisons. But yeah, so my first gig out of college was, yeah, being the dietitian for about, at the time, and this has probably changed, at the time there was 55 state prisons in Georgia, and we were feeding anywhere around 60,000 inmates across those. And it was mainly male, but there was female only facilities as well. So yeah, did that for about 3 years. That was really, really interesting.
Did that look like managing specific dietary needs or, like, laying guidelines for general what you're
Yeah.
serving?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of both. So I worked at a central office in Atlanta. So luckily, I wasn't in a facility day in, day out. I did visit them on occasion. But
Mm.
essentially, I would kind of manage a team of people from far away. So basically, my name was on it was like a 4-week cycle menu that we did for the adults. And so I was kind of the one that built out breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks,
Mm.
built out the recipes, trialed new recipes, new food items, costed out. One of the other cool things about Georgia that I'll just throw in, because I think it's still such a cool way to do things to this day, is in the state of Georgia, they actually have the inmates participate in it's kind of a job program where they actually are the ones that are cooking the food, working the farm, milking the cows, canning
Wow.
the vegetables. So it kind of saves on overhead, but it's also a really good experience for them. So it kind of was like it was just a really cool experience because I learned about the farming side of things too and menu building, special diets for all these people. Oh yeah, it was really cool, but it was a lot for sure.
Awesome.
Hmm.
So you're telling me they farmed their own food in the prisons? How cool.
Yeah.
That's
I
amazing.
know. Yeah, it's very cool. And they actually had to, depending on the location of the prison, they tried to kind of figure out, okay, what in this area could they help with from a job perspective? And so, especially in the South Georgia area, tons of farmland. They can do vegetables, oranges, onions. Yeah, and I went to a facility where they milk cows. And so it kind of depended
Cool.
on which facility you were assigned to, but you usually had something going on there related to food. And all 55 facilities, the inmates cooked, prepared, served their own food.
That's
Cool.
so good.
Mhm.
I went to Emory for PA school and we had a trip. We call it the Farm Workers Project. And every year they take the students to usually South Georgia. So I was in Valdosta. Did you ever go there?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and we worked with a lot of the farmers, and a lot of them are, migrant workers,
Mhm.
and they don't have access really to healthcare, so
Right.
it was such a good way to just jump in, felt really like we could help on
Right.
just simple things, a lot of them had, like, issues with their feet because they're sitting in or, like, standing in murky waters all day farming, and,
Mhm.
anyway, really cool to see the farms there and see who they're distributing to, so I'm
Mhm.
sure that was
Yeah.
part of where your food was coming from. That's
Yeah.
really
It was
cool.
very cool. Hmm.
Yeah.
So I did adult prisons for about 3.5 years. Then I moved on to juvenile prisons for 3.5 years. After that, I was like, I'm going to start a nutrition consultation business. So I was just like, I felt like I wanted to try to be an entrepreneur at least once in my life. And I
Mhm.
did. And honestly, social media killed me, killed me. I
Mm.
could not keep up. I'd have clients come to me and say, with a new diet each week. And it just started to get to the point where it just started to be really frustrating, I think, for me, because the thing about nutrition is it really does go back to the basics. Yes, along the way, they'll come out with all kinds of, diets, Atkins, keto, whatever's the new hit diet at this time, it's going to continue to come back. It's a cyclic thing that we see, but people just love a quick fix. But,
Mhm.
my whole thing with nutrition is it's the basics, right? Moderation, variety, whole foods are best, fruits and veggies are good, try to be lean in your meat choices. But it's just not that hard. I think people want that kind of easy out sometimes, is kind of what I noticed. So So yeah, social media is tough. I kind of got to the point where I was finding my family and my friends were relying on non-medical advice from social media influencers than listening to what I had to say. And
Mhm.
that just got really tough for me, hearing it time and again and having to explain why this might work at first, but will you be able to only eat protein for 3 years, for the rest of your life, whatever it might be? So I'm kind of the type that feels like everything fits. I'm very much a moderation type person that you should be able to eat and enjoy food, enjoy life, depending on what your goals are, right? If you're trying to maintain, lose, gain, whatever that might be, just be overall generally healthy. I just think all foods fit. But of course, when I say that, if you had pizza every day of your life for all meals, you might not be hitting your nutritional goals. So moderation, but also a variety of foods from different food groups. I think everybody's different. Everybody likes different foods and everybody needs different things.
Mhm.
That's a refreshing perspective because it can feel so overwhelming. And a
Yes.
lot of what we talk about as well is just we're inundated with all of this, like all these quick hits and recommendations. And I often just feel like, man, I am not meeting these expectations, or it just
Yeah.
feels impossible, whether it's financial reasons or time. I don't
Yes.
have a lot of time to sit and meal prep or
Yeah.
to get a meal in right after my workout or all of the
Mhm.
things that are recommended.
Yeah.
And with these diets, I think maybe there's some short-term, benefit, but if
Yeah.
your body gets used to that, and then
Mhm.
I see a lot of people having to adjust, and it almost
Yes.
is this pendulum swing of feeling good and then almost
Mhm.
feeling worse
Yeah.
after your body's recovering.
Absolutely.
So yeah, moderation, like figuring out what does my body need? What's
Exactly.
realistic for me? And then
Right.
trying to stick to those
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about anything particular for women, let's say around
Mhm.
our ages 20s into
Yeah.
40s? Anything particular that you want women to know about their bodies, their nutrition needs that maybe is different from men?
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of came from a journey that I went on, which I'm more than willing to talk about as well. But I would say for women specifically, so I'm kind of in my later part of 30s, unfortunately. I'm owning it now, which is great. I don't
Mhm.
feel old. I still feel young, and I'm trying to be the best version of myself.
Yeah.
But as we age, I would say for women, especially kind of in the later 30s, honestly, 30s in general, let's be honest, maybe even late 20s, I feel like we really got to start paying attention to some of those other vitamins and minerals that maybe I wasn't paying attention to before. I know this can again vary from person to person, varies on your diet and what you consume, what activities you're involved in. But for me specifically, something that really stood out was iron. I had no idea that, having a period and not, eating high iron foods, I just wasn't being very conscientious of it, right? And before you know it, that's kind of what led to, my near anemia, vitamin D, all that good stuff, really good for your bones and things like that, all the B vitamins to give us energy. So I would say, for most women, just focusing on iron, I think seems to be a big one because it can play such a big part of mental health. And I know for a lot of
Yeah.
women, vitamin deficiency is so common just because of typically the menstrual period, menstrual cycle. And then mine, of course, is very heavy as I've gotten older. For some
Mhm.
people, it lightens up.
Okay, well,
Mhm.
tell us about your journey. Tell us about yourself, what you've gone through, what you've learned.
Absolutely. So, I'll start with this. I've always been an anxious person. That is just my personality. So that I've lived with my entire life. But early last year, the first thing that happened was I think I started to develop acid reflux. And at the time, I was like, "This is weird, but I'm getting older, right? It is what it is." I really, honestly, it was after the holidays, so I'm sure I was not taking care of myself. I'd probably eaten, Thanksgiving, Christmas foods, tons of sodas, alcohol, whatever. So
Mhm.
that's how I started the new year. And then my aunt ended up passing away suddenly.
Mhm.
And it was, we knew it was going to happen at some point because she had breast cancer that had metastasized to her bones. But you never know, right? You can plan for death as much as you want, but you never really know until it happens how it
Mhm.
impacts you.
Yeah.
So she ended up passing away. And I don't know if it was that and then my poor eating at the time, but I basically had the most ridiculous amount of anxiety I've ever had in my entire life. Like it kind
Mhm.
of came out of nowhere, right? It was just like, I mean, it's hard to explain for people that maybe have never experienced it before, including my significant other who's type B and a male, because I think, sometimes males and females
Yeah.
feel a little different. So basically, I just kind of spiraled from there. I'll say it was like it started out where I would get what I now know as panic attacks or
Mhm.
anxiety attacks for silly things like, for no reason at all. And then I was giving myself anxiety attacks because I was worried about having anxiety. So I don't know if
Mhm.
that's like a very, common thing.
Yeah.
And so I was having anxiety about having anxiety. And then it just kind of spiraled because then I started to get into my head. And it could have been real because anxiety really messes with you physically. A lot of people don't realize, and deficiencies as a woman, it messes with you physically, mentally. And so I was convinced something was wrong with me. I was like, my stomach, I'm not hungry, I'm losing weight, my sleep is terrible, I don't feel like myself. Like I remember one day, I'd cried, usual day, and I'd looked in the mirror and I could not even, I felt like I was looking through glasses. Like it wasn't even me that I was looking at.
Mm.
And I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. So, anyways, it was this long several months of mental health, anxiety, depression, sleep. And then I started to get weird stuff like I was kind of sweating at night.
Mhm.
I'm feeling very weak around my periods. My periods were all over the place. And then months went by. I went to, I think I told you, Cruzy, like, I think I went to a doctor every week. I mean, it was like I knew something wasn't right with me. I just couldn't figure out what it was. And I'm very, just with my type A, I feel like I'm very aware of my
Mhm.
body, right? And we as women, I think we know when something is just not right. And so from the beginning, they did some tests, some of the normal tests, and they were like, everything's great, you're fine. And I should have known in that moment because there was one test and it was related to iron and my blood cells that was off. But I wasn't anemic. So
Mm.
no diagnosis. You're fine. You're just dealing with anxiety. Let's get you on some medication, whatever. So time passes, and things just kind of slowly like ebb and flow, but eventually get worse. And at that point, because I hadn't really been eating, whatever low iron I had was now almost zero. But what had happened was 3 months had to go by for me to finally go to a hormone doctor, which another woman had recommended to me because no other doctors could find anything. I mean, ladies, I was in like the ER. I was in like, I mean, it was all over the place and nobody could figure it out. And I think that was actually worse for me because I like answers. So when
Yeah.
there are no answers, it honestly makes me feel like I'm a crazy person, which made it all worse. So one day, and actually there was two instances. I was I was actually getting I was at Orchard Med Spa in Colorado trying to like do something good for my mental health. I think I was getting a facial at the time. And I was telling the lady, I was like, I've just really been dealing with stuff the past 3 months. I don't feel like myself. And she says, have you ever gotten your hormones checked? And I was like, no. And she started kind of describe her experience with it. And I was like, these sound like a lot of the symptoms that I've had. And no doctor along the way has ever said, check your, hormones and maybe we should get a better panel on your iron, like none of that. And so I ended up scheduling an appointment with a hormone office in Littleton, Colorado. Unfortunately, there was a long wait. So of course there was that like, okay, I got to wait 6 weeks to get in. That was a journey. I finally get in and get all of my tests done, and they must have done a more thorough analysis of iron because it can have a very, very low iron, low ferritin storage, which is the storage form of iron, and not actually be anemic, meaning you have less red blood cells than you should. So they found out that my ferritin was almost zero. Iron, by the way, can mess with sleep, can make you feel anxious. It can make you have heart palpitations. It can make you sweaty. These were all the things that I was having. And it was like I finally got an answer. And then in addition, because I believe probably in your 30s at some point, typically after 35, us as women really start to get into perimenopause, which that's a whole thing that, my God, I wish we talked about in school more. I wish women
Yeah.
in general talked about things more. That's really my takeaway for the day. Like, talk, ladies, because,
Mhm.
I didn't realize, but my testosterone was also very low on the point of like I qualified to get a supplement of some sort. And I chose to use the cream. So between my iron and testosterone, I started those. And of course, I also started an antidepressant just because of the journey that I had been on. It was just really taxing. So I started on Prozac.
Mhm.
Love an antidepressant. I fully support anyone that needs to take them. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But between those three things, Prozac, iron, and then the testosterone, I slowly pulled myself out and I'm me again. But I think there was a lot of frustration in that journey because it's like, why, when I went to the doctor the first time, when I explained these symptoms to you and you knew my age, that maybe these things weren't tested at the beginning because we could have prevented all of this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a very interesting journey. Lots of things happened. I'm glad I went through it. And from now, I think what I've taken away from that is I tell everyone my story. Every woman I know, I'm like, Like if I start to hear like, oh, your mental health is a little off, like let's talk. Like, have you gotten your hormones checked out? Where are your vitamin levels at? Like, how's your
Yeah.
eating? But it was crazy. It was a crazy year last year. So hopefully
Mm.
2026 will be a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through that, and I'm glad
Oh,
you got answers, and I'm the
yeah.
same way, like, a vague feeling of something being off and not having a clear reason why is
Yes.
horrible, and I think that
Yes.
happens to a lot of women, especially kind of in our seasons of life,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, the way our medical system is set up in the US right
Yes.
now is it just really limits a lot of the more, like, conventional medically trained providers time-wise, and so they're just ruling out emergent things or the most common things, and sometimes
Yeah.
they don't have the time to dive in. Like someone, I don't know if you saw like a functional practitioner or naturopath or something who
Mhm.
there is a time and a place for both of those providers, and
Mhm.
ideally you see both like you
Yeah.
did, and they both do their job thoroughly. But
Mhm.
sometimes one or the other might miss. So I'm sorry, it was a windy journey, but glad
It
you
was.
figured it
Yeah,
out.
thank you. And
Yeah.
sometimes I have to remind myself because I'll get in my head about it. And I'm like, I think that it was almost like meant to be. Like it was preparing me for things to come in life. And I think something else I learned too from this, my biggest takeaway is trust how you feel. Like I kind of will mention this. This is really like my overarching thing for all my friends and anyone I talk to is like, when something's not right. So keep pushing if they don't find it. And then kind of my other takeaway is because I tell my sister and brother-in-law who are pediatricians, right? Not necessarily in the space, but I'm like, okay, guys, can we figure out ways to be more proactive versus reactive in the medical
Yes.
space?
Yes.
Because I just don't think we should be treating it when it gets to that point, Like why
Yes.
are we not checking hormones like once a year or a certain age, excuse me,
Mhm.
once a year? Let's go. Let's check hormones. Let's check vitamins. I mean, these things, it's not that I don't know. I just wish looking back that we had been more proactive in in my medical journey. Just and again, the providers did the best they could, like you said, but it's almost like that's not their thought is to be
Right.
proactive. They just
Yeah.
kind of try to find things immediately wrong with you in the moment instead of trying to really figure out what's going on. So,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are probably doing this to what you're saying because it's so true. And it's actually what is kind of led me to want to do this podcast
mhm,
is getting more into the preventative and
mhm,
proactive health medicine side of things because you're right. The way that I was trained in PA school and the way that medical school in the US is structured is to diagnose disease. Like you learn how the body should function optimally. You learn about disease when it's not functioning optimally, and then you learn how to treat that disease, typically
mhm.
with a combination of lifestyle medications and then procedures or surgeries. But I would say 80% of the focus is on the diagnosis and the treatment of disease. So there's just so little focus on one, nutrition and
Mhm.
food as
Yeah.
medicine
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
prevent disease, but then also to treat, like iron
Mhm.
deficiency, a very real thing. So I love that. And I think focusing on being proactive about your health is like one
Mhm.
of our Eden and I's biggest messages is like know
Yeah.
your body
Yep.
and get your labs tested. That's a huge
Mhm.
thing because
Yes.
you don't know what's actually going on inside unless you take an objective look. And so
Right.
I agree with you. I actually am a big proponent of people getting a full lab panel that's a lot more in depth than your typical annual physical, at
Yes.
least at minimum, starting when you're about 30. And
Mhm.
then that way you know your baseline. And if you ever feel like you're off from that, do it again. If you have the
Yes.
finances, do it every year. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Mhm.
you may as well. So,
Yes, I completely agree. And just to add to your point, something that's missing here too is because we all are different. At this point in our medical field, we have no database of like what does Jessica look like at 25? What does Jessica
Mhm.
look like at 35, 37? And so that's also something, is that's where I agree with you big time is if I could go back in time and tell myself it would be let's do a full panel yearly to see what's slightly off because slightly off for me might be normal for you, right? So
yeah.
Well, and to
absolutely.
get that full panel or full picture when you are functioning optimally to be able to
Mhm.
then know when things are off, to know
Right.
what's functional for you or what's optimal for
Mhm.
you, which I don't know
Absolutely.
what you would if you guys would say a number, like 25 or 30, maybe 30 is the best number to start. But I've just been encouraged to do that by older women in my life of like now is maybe when you might feel the
Mhm.
healthiest. So see where
Yes.
your labs are now and see if you can continue at those
Yeah,
levels even as you get older.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you also made a good point earlier, I think, just talking about things in general, talking about
Mhm,
things or experiences that we've been through. We've talked about iron deficiency and acne and a lot of these things that maybe there's an assumption that you should have it figured out
mhm,
depending on your age, or you've dealt with anxiety, but you know how to manage it. And it's confusing
mhm,
when all of a sudden, as this mature person, you feel like you can't manage it. But I think that's
mhm,
a lot of people's story, even with other areas of health. Like I've expressed that with acne. Like, man, I thought this was for teenagers. Why am I
mhm.
unable to manage my skin as a
Right.
26-year-old? But that's so silly. We're dynamic beings.
Mhm.
We have lots of inputs
Exactly.
and outputs, so it's necessary to be checking in consistently.
And especially as women, right? We have different stages of life. I mean,
Mhm.
no hard feelings on men. We love men, right? But I do think that for us, we're constantly evolving.
Mhm.
We're changing, our hormones are changing, whereas they kind of maintain for the most part, right? Their entire life. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Acne is something I've dealt with too. Not randomly. I think that was like 10 years ago. I was like, what in the world? And so it's like these like phases in life that we as women have to go through and honestly don't know much about.
Mhm.
And just to speak on that a little bit, because throughout my journey, I do want to say that if my family ever listens to this podcast, they were amazing through my journey because it's tough. It's tough on people around you when you're going through a mental health crisis. It's tough on your significant other. But something I realized is that, and I don't know if it's generational, I don't know if it's just my parents, but it was like my mom never told me anything about her experience with perimenopause,
Mhm.
menopause, and she realized she was telling me as I was going through this, so she was like, "Wow, I wish I would have told you more about this because we might have been able to figure it out sooner." Like
Mhm.
the symptoms that she had. And so that's why I'm like a big advocate of talking about it. And all my girlfriends now are like getting their hormones checked. And so I do think there's a little bit of that too, is maybe there's a generational thing there as well. So yeah.
And
I
understanding
just,
family history, if there is some kind of predisposition to where you're more likely to have X, Y, or Z, to know
yeah.
that, to be
Right.
prepared, to be preventative in that sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, iron specifically is
Mhm.
something I think is very related to mental health and
Mhm.
very common to be deficient in
Yes.
among females, mostly because of our menstrual cycles, but then
Mhm.
also because I think it is changing, but there has been kind of there's like this view of like as females, we don't eat a lot of like protein or meat
Mhm.
or, and you
Right.
can get iron from vegetables as well. But I think
Mhm.
that's
Or
part of
we
it
just
is
don't
like,
eat a lot. We don't eat as much
yeah,
as
Yes.
like
men.
we try to be
Yeah.
like dainty. And so we're
Yes.
probably
Yeah.
deficient and then we're losing
Yes.
blood. So
Yeah.
that is definitely a lab I would say would be helpful to start getting checked as early as 20 if you're
Absolutely.
menstruating. And to your point, it's not just your CBC, your complete blood count that
Mhm.
shows your red blood cells, it's an iron panel. So,
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep.
it surprises me that you have to ask for that, but I
Mhm.
think you do have to advocate for yourself and say, I
Yeah.
really want to check my actual iron storage, my ferritin levels, my iron saturation. Can you run
Mhm.
that? And the
Yeah.
answer should always be yes. If
Yeah.
not, maybe you need to find a new provider. But
Thanks.
let's talk about what other vitamins, minerals, nutrients have you just through your journey or your education
Uh-huh.
noticed play a big role on just either mental health or just overall vitality? Like anything else that
Yeah.
you want to speak on?
So, a couple key things that I definitely try to be more mindful of. So, magnesium is something that I have been taking recently. I know that there's like a couple key vitamins and minerals that like most women just tend to be deficient in, and it's iron, it's magnesium, vitamin D. So those I do highly recommend taking because all of those play a role in mental health, just overall functioning. And then another one that I've kind of started to throw in my diet is creatine. People always think creatine is muscle building and all that good stuff. And it does play a role in that, but they're realizing too for just brain development, mental health. So I also have some creatine gummies.
I take the exact same stack. So I'm with you. I do take a prenatal that's like a multivitamin
Mm. Yep.
basically. But on top
Hmm.
of that, I take an iron and it's iron bisglycinate. So I bet it's the
Yes.
same one you take. A
Yep.
vitamin D with K2 and
Yeah.
then magnesium.
I would say outside of that for women, I mean, if we're talking about nutrients in general, I mean, fiber is huge, period, right? I mean, fiber is king in my opinion. Protein, things that you're right. It's tough that we don't maybe typically get in or don't get in as much as maybe men do for whatever reason that might be.
We've talked about testosterone almost having too much testosterone related to acne and
Mhm,
other things, but it can go both ways. And I think for
mhm,
women, similarly, like we've said, testosterone is considered for men, and same with
mhm.
creatine and high
Yeah.
protein, strength training,
Mhm.
all of these categories of health that have been sort
Yeah.
of exclusive to men are really like
Right.
recommended for men that
Mhm.
women are now catching on to
Yes.
and
Yeah.
feeling much better, feeling stronger, feeling more in
Mhm.
their body.
One question I had earlier that I forgot to ask. Is there a certain diet, and I know this is not really in line with your like view of health and nutrition, but just because people will ask, is there
Mhm.
a certain diet that through studies and through just the test of time has stood out as just a general healthy guide for people if they're just looking to get healthier? Let's say like, keto,
Mhm.
Atkins, paleo, Mediterranean, whatever. Is there a certain one that
Yeah.
stands out from what you know?
When anyone asks me what type of diet is the best diet, I always say it's the one that works for you long term
Hmm.
because everybody has different food preferences, right? So it's really got to be what can you sustain for your entire life? If you're a person that, loves meat and you can have a high protein diet the rest of your life and that's fine for you, you can make that work. Right? Obviously incorporating the healthy fruits and veggies and things like that. But that to me I think is my key takeaway. I know other dietitians and people might have different answers, but I would say what can you do long term, what works for you, while also just including all the normal healthy stuff that we talk about, right? I mean, fruits and veggies, everyone knows they're healthy for a reason. There's tons of studies behind them, there's tons of additional nutrients inside of them that we're still researching. Lean meats more often, seafood at least once a week. I mean, all these things, but like what is sustainable for you, right? Think about what's doable for you and then try to take that and turn it into maybe a healthier version of that, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have seen in studies of like longevity and heart health preventing like cardiovascular events, the Mediterranean diet typically stands out.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's kind of what I try to
Mhm.
base my intake on is the
Yeah.
Mediterranean diet because it's so simple. It's like
Mhm.
whole foods.
Yep.
They're typically one ingredient foods, so they don't have a whole list of what's inside of them.
Mhm.
It's a lot of greens, a lot of fiber, protein, a lot of seafood, and then also a lot of healthy fats,
Mhm.
avocados,
Yep.
nuts,
Yeah.
seeds,
Yeah.
olives, all of that stuff. So I think if someone's like, I don't even know what's healthy
Good
because
start.
social media is so confusing.
Yeah.
You have the carnivore diet, you have
Yes.
vegans, and
Yes.
it's like, I
Yeah.
people juicing. You're like, "What in the
Yes.
world?" My
Yeah.
opinion is a very whole foods focused diet where you're
Yes.
eating, like, real food that you could have
Yeah.
gone and either killed or picked
Yeah.
up from a farm
Right.
on your
Yes.
own, and then obviously cooking in your own home is always gonna be better than going out.
Yeah.
Not always, but typically.
Yeah.
Are there any I don't know if you're even on social media anymore because it did you dirty, but is there
Yeah.
anything that you see circulating around social media that you want to bust as far as just, like, something about food or a diet that you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's just not true."
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have you are correct. I am off of social media. And there's
Okay.
air quotes if anybody can't see us, but they can hear us. I'm air quoting that right now because I use the web version of Instagram. So I can
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of still get on. I never see anything I actually want to see, and then I leave.
That's great,
So
that's
I'm
smart.
trying to think. I couldn't even tell you what the craziness is out there right now. You guys will have to tell me what craziness is out there on the internet these days. Cause I did, since it did me dirty, I did try to step away as
Yeah.
best as
No,
I
I'm
could.
glad for your mental health.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think we should all be doing that. I think we should all be using the web for Instagram.
Yeah. Right.
Instead not getting, like, the reels and everything. One thing
Yeah.
that we all have seen a million times is the, like, what I eat in a day clips, and
Hmm.
I don't I when I see those, I'm always interested in them,
Mhm.
but I'm very skeptical when I
Yeah.
watch it, and
Yeah.
I personally went through, a season of an eating disorder with
Yeah.
anorexia, so I think especially for me, I can get I don't get triggered anymore, thank goodness, but I do get I'm just sensitive. I'm like, "Ah, I
Uh-huh.
don't want the wrong person to see this or hear this and then feel like they're not good enough or whatever."
Yeah.
So I will say for anyone who has an eating disorder or struggles with disordered eating, food noise, disliking your body, whatever that is,
Um,
probably not following people who make that kind of content is likely
mhm.
healthy,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
sometimes it is really helpful. Like if I see someone who I'm like, this person knows what they're talking about, for one,
Mhm.
maybe they have
Yeah,
some background in nutrition.
yeah.
And two, they're focused on health and
Mhm.
vitality and they're not focused on their appearance. Maybe I
Yeah.
can learn something from them. And three, they're being honest because like
Yeah.
there is no way some of these girls are actually eating what they say they're eating and nothing
Mhm.
else every day.
Yeah,
Like, are you kidding me?
yeah,
How are you're
yeah,
probably or maybe they are and they're so unhappy. You never know.
yeah. And just to add a little bit to that, so you kind of touched on just maybe the volume of food that you're like, oh, do you actually eat that and survive? For me, it's like you actually have the time to make all this.
Right.
You know,
How?
because
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of social media kind of makes life feel like, oh, everyone should be able to make this meal and take a pretty picture of it. And when
Mhm.
in fact it's like, no, Corey and I are super busy for the next month. We're gonna try factor meals. You know,
Mhm.
it's like, or one of those pre-made meal boxes, or our meals are super simple. We've got a veggie, a meat, and a starch, and that's
Right.
it. There's nothing fancy about it. And
Mhm.
so I think that that's kind of my qualm with it is like, okay, this is really cool and beautiful. Does anyone else in the world have time to do this?
Only the
You know?
influencer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So it's just, yeah, the reality is just a lot of times not there.
Mhm.
Not for everybody, but for some. And I think sometimes that's got to be hard for people that, are trying to get better and they're just
Mhm.
like, "Well, I don't know what to do. I should be able to make an immaculate 10-course meal every day."
Mhm.
And that's just not true. It's
It
just
feels
not.
unsustainable, and I
It
know
it,
it's
it does.
yeah. I
Exactly. The
I think
sustainability part.
yes, I think social media can be very inspiring, and if you think of it as more of a creative, like, artistic space that you can get some
Mhm.
ideas from, wonderful.
Yeah.
But, like, we're
Mhm.
human, and we're gonna
Mhm.
compare, and we're gonna get down on ourselves, and we're gonna
Mhm.
be jealous, and so
Yeah.
you gotta be smart with how you use it. Cut it off if it's
Yeah.
not working for you. It's interesting right now, especially on
Mhm.
social media, where so many people are on Ozempic and just losing
Mhm.
weight very rapidly. And
Yeah.
maybe even they didn't need to lose weight and they're just trying to get to some goal body composition that they've seen someone else on social
Right.
media have and they want to look like them. It's an interesting
Right.
time to be balancing like health and then vanity of how you want to look and then
Yeah.
I think eating disorders really sneakily can come into that space and kind of take
Mhm.
over.
Yeah.
So I think it's just I don't know,
Mhm.
it's just important for women to be aware of. I mean, probably a lot of people listening have
Yeah.
struggled with their own form of eating disorder, whether it's a
Mhm.
legit anorexia or bulimia or binge eating, or whether it's
Mhm.
just your mind being consumed with food noise. I think that is so much more common
Right.
than we realize.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think the message that I would love to portray, and I think you would agree, is food should be something to be enjoyed. Food is
Yes.
medicine. Food can heal you, and
Yes.
it doesn't have to be taking up all this space in your mind. If it is, and you're struggling and you're constantly thinking about food and your body in negative ways or ways that are making you anxious, that's not healthy. So, I think that it's
Right.
important to talk
Yep.
to someone you trust or a medical professional about that. A
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
of the things that I see a lot. One is creatine, so I'm glad you touched on that.
Okay.
I
Mhm.
also think I'm not personally taking it right now, but I want to. I haven't figured out what
Mhm.
brand I wanna take. I think it's great for mental clarity,
Mhm.
for strengthening your muscles, all kinds of things. Sleep. The other thing is protein is, like,
Mhm.
so big right now, and there's
Mhm.
a lot of different recommendations on how much you should eat. I think the standard, like, medical is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day,
Mhm.
Yep. That's what
but
I
then
said. Mhm.
okay, but then a lot of more of the, like, wellness health people now say up to, like, a gram per pound per day, which let's
Yeah.
say you're 150 pounds, 150 grams of protein is not easy. You have to be very
Oh,
intentional. Mhm.
yes. And for me, I just don't like protein that much.
Yeah.
You know, I love carbs. 0.8 per kilogram is what I remember is like, you're doing great. You're going to survive. Corey, my significant other, who is kind of more into the bodybuilding space, he's more on the, like the 1 pound or 1 gram per pound, excuse me. And it's just like, how do you even? It's a lot of protein shakes. It's a lot of stuff like
Yes.
that. But that works for him. He loves meat. He loves things like that. That is just not doable for me.
Sometimes I think it's a bit overwhelming.
Mhm.
Everything has protein in it now. It's like
Mhm.
you put cottage cheese in everything. And I'm like, that kind of
Yep.
makes me want to vomit, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank you for the idea. I will
Yeah.
say you kind of touched on this, but with all of those trends and like with everything you see someone do a what I eat in the day. Maybe it looks pretty different from yours.
Mhm.
Maybe for some women, they thrive on like 3 meals and 2 snacks, and they eat
Mhm.
frequently smaller meals. Some women do so well with a more, like, time-restricted eating schedule
Yeah.
or less
Yeah.
meals. Some
Mhm.
women feel so good with lots of protein and less fiber. Some women feel horrible,
Right.
and they have to eat a lot more carbs. So what I would
Mhm.
say is stick to the basics like you were saying. Look
Mhm.
into a
Yep.
Mediterranean diet if you're really,
Yeah.
like, clueless on what to even eat, but
Absolutely.
at the core, be aware of your body and what makes you feel good, because food should
Yes.
be making you feel good. You shouldn't be having crashes of energy. You shouldn't be
Mhm.
bloating
Yeah.
painfully every day. You shouldn't be
Mhm.
unable to sleep. You
Yep.
should be unable to concentrate, like, something's probably off with
Right.
your food could be
Absolutely.
a part of it, so
Mhm.
that's how I'd cut through all the noise on social media.
For
Mhm.
sure. Absolutely. I think if I just had to like shoot some things out for any women that are listening, you know yourself best, right? We all know what feels right, what doesn't. Continue to get help, find answers. If you're not getting answers you want from one person, try somewhere else. Don't give up. We're all here to support each other. That's kind of the other thing I've realized. We're all in this together. What a journey it is to be a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All the things that we do and go through in life. That's kind of from the mental health perspective is, yeah, we're all here for each other because it can feel very lonely when you're kind of dealing with some of the mental health stuff. So just know you are not alone. Millions and millions and millions of people deal with that on a daily basis. Many of those are women, high performing, high functioning women. We all got problems.
Mhm.
And then from a nutrition perspective, I would say that you really kind of touched on that. My key takeaways are, do what works for you. I do agree with you that if you were to ask me, of all the ones, what makes the most sense, I think Mediterranean, I fully agree with you on that. So I think those would be the key takeaways. If I missed something, let me know.
No, I think that was fabulous. Anything else, Eden?
No, that was amazing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for taking the time